Patterson. I live in Reedsport, Oregon. I've been into Bigfoot since I was a young kid. I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film when I was 7. I read my first book on Bigfoot when I was 7, and I've been into the Bigfoot TV shows and read books about it and stuff like that ever since I was a kid. I have had sounds when I was out hunting of something like in the tree lines that sounded like it was walking alongside of you. And if you stop, it would stop, but I'd never acquainted it to being a Bigfoot incident. But prior to this event in 2017, I'd never had any actual experience. For our wedding anniversary in 2017, my wife and I went on a camping trip in a tent at a little campground. It's a BLM campground just outside of Florence, Oregon, that's called Clay Creek. We were the only people in the campground. It was a week before the camp closed down for the season, and the camp host had already left, so we were the only people there. And the first day that we were there, we had no incidents. We just did our camping thing, went on hikes, and had a good time. The second night that we were there, my wife and I decided to go out to a large field that's in the campground there, and we were going to stargaze because it was a beautiful night out and the stars were very bright. The moon was really bright. So while we were laying in the field looking at the stars, we had a small dog with us. He was a little Cocker Spaniel. And he started growling and showing his teeth, and his hackles went up, and he was pointing towards the Sayusla River in the woods there. And I had a flashlight with me, and I'd shine the flashlight around and did not see anything. There were no animals or anything that we could see. And he was getting a little more agitated, and it made my wife feel kind of creepy, so she asked if we could go back to the camp. So we went back to camp, and she decided to go to bed. And so she went into the tent and went to bed. And I sat out at the campfire to have a beer and just kind of kick back by the campfire. And while I was at the camp, sitting there, I had my back to the river. There was a large splash that happened in the river right behind it, where I was sitting. And I thought maybe an animal had jumped into the water, or maybe a fish jumped or something. So I went to take a look and see what it was, shine my light on the water, and I could see the ripples on the water, but I didn't see anything else out of the ordinary. So I felt it must have been a fish or something. So I went and sat back down, and about 3 to 5 minutes later, it did it again. The second time, the sound was a large splash, and it was followed by the sound of rocks clinking together, like it was underwater, which led me to believe something threw a large rock. So I thought maybe some kids were messing with us. So I yelled out that it was very funny, ha ha, you got me type of thing. And I hid in the bush that was right there to see if I could catch them doing it again. And I sat there for about 45 minutes and nothing else happened. At that point, I figured, you know what, it's getting late, time to go to bed. So I went and got in the tent and went to sleep. And it was about 2:30 in the morning. A vehicle drove by the campground on the road that runs outside the campground, and it had either a flatbed trailer or something behind it that was carrying a lot of metal pieces, because they were clinking together, and it was enough noise that it woke me up. I was listening to the noise, and I noticed the headlights disappearing past the tent, and just as that light went away from the tent, something right outside the tent screamed, and it was the most ungodly sound I've ever heard in my life. The scream started as a very low guttural sound that it reverberated inside your body. It made your insides shake. And it was a long moaning sound that went from a low pitch all the way to a very high screaming pitch, and then lowered back down. And while that was going on, it scared me so bad, I grabbed a handgun, and I thought, whatever it was out there, if it came to the tent, I was going to be ready to defend ourselves. And I laid there for a couple of hours looking at the moonlight through the tent, and nothing ever happened. So I eventually fell back asleep, apparently, and woke up in the morning, and I asked my wife if she had heard the sound. The other thing that happened when that scream happened is our dog went under the bed and he wouldn't come out. So in the morning, my wife said she didn't hear a thing. She slept right through it. The dog still wouldn't come out from under the bed, even though it was daylight. We had to coax him out. And I went out and looked around the camp to see if anything had been disturbed. And you could see footprints in the sand, but it wasn't defined. It was just a crater in the sand. And what I did find was about 20 feet from the tent, a branch that was probably 2 inches in diameter. It was about 6 feet high, had been broken right at the base of the tree, and it had been twisted around 2 times. It made what they call a green stick break. And I looked around that area, and the salal that was around the trees had been smashed down, but by what, I couldn't tell you. So that was our experience. I spoke with David Ellis from the Olympic Project about that a couple of months later and explained to him what I had heard. And he told me that he's recorded that sound several times, and he had no doubt that we had a Sasquatch outside the tent.
I'm Brock Powell from Auburn, Washington. Been a utility inspector for all my life and interested in Bigfoot for about been looking and going out in the field for about 15 years. Been interested since I was a kid. It started when we used to tease my dad because of his long hairy arms and no neck, that he might be related to any baboons or gibbons or gorillas that we saw on public broadcasting channels. So we used to tease him about, oh, there's your cousin, Dad. And then one day we were at the Space Needle in Seattle, and as we were walking along, we saw a still photo of the Patterson-Gimlin film where Patty turned to look at the camera, and it was labeled October 21st, 1967. I turned and looked at my dad and I said, well, I know you're the missing link now because that's the day I was born. And so for the longest time, I really believed that there was an association between me and Bigfoot because of that. And then I found out that it was mislabeled and that film actually was taken on the 20th. And so I was really disappointed. But anyway, no, that was my thing. I knew that Dad was the missing link once I saw that date. But that was what got me started. My first experience came on an expedition that I had paid to go on through one of the bigger research organizations that you've heard of on the internet. And so when I went out, I really didn't know what to expect. We were sort of given we were given the instructions of what not to do as far as being aggressive, no pointing, no chasing, really behave yourself. Don't be a jerk. And then we were told to just split up and go out into the woods and see what we could see. It was after midnight when we headed out for the first time. I met up with two people that I had never encountered before in my life. One of those is somebody I'm here with today. The three guys, we headed out down a trail that we'd never really been down before, and we walked 5.5 miles. When we started out, it was after midnight, so we walked for 5.5 miles, and absolutely nothing happened the entire walk. And so I was really under the impression, had the overwhelming feeling that there's nothing out here except for the three of us. We're it. And my friend, he said he was going to howl because that was one of the things that we were told that we could do to sort of engage or hopefully initiate some sort of a response. So he howled, and then all three of us dutifully listened, and again, absolutely nothing happened. So then I had this sense of, look, I just want to go back to camp. I got 5.5 miles to go back. I'm tired. I just want my pillow. And we were walking along, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, from my 10 o'clock position, and I can't tell you really how far away, but there was a flash of light. This flash of light was a white light with a green tinge to it, so I call it a white-green light. I don't know else. I call it a white-green light. The white-green light flashed, and as soon as it did, one red eye turned on. The other turned on. They both looked at me. They faded in and out for about 10 seconds. I couldn't tell if it was fading in and out. I couldn't tell if it was winking and blinking. I couldn't tell if it was turning. I couldn't tell if there was a branch in the way. It just was fading in and out. It was really strange. It extinguished. Another flash of white-green light. Red eye turned on. Red eye turned on again. They did the same thing for about another 10 seconds. And then they extinguished. during that 20-second interval while that was happening, I got super excited. I started pointing. I see eye shine. I see eye shine. I pointed to where it happened. And these two guys started chastising me. Stop it. Stop pointing. And so I held my arms close and I said, okay, right there at my 10 o'clock position, I see eye shine. And one of them said, I see it too. Really was maybe the best thing I could have heard at that moment, because the last thing I wanted to do is imagine something or make something up. I'll be the first one to admit if I thought that I was going to make it up, that my mind came to. In this case, I was already under the impression nothing was out there except for the three of us. When the flash of light happened, it captivated my attention. It drew me away from them. These two guys were walking in front of me and off to my right just a little bit. The flash of light happened to my left. And when I don't understand. I can't explain it other than it took my attention away from what I was doing. And when those eyes turned on, I was so invigorated, so excited. So people asked me, weren't you scared? I was like, no, it was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I wanted, let's do it again. I just couldn't. No, I wasn't scared at all. And so the next day, there was people walking down this trail, the same trail that the three of us had gone down the night before. I explained to them that I had seen eye shine the night before. I'm new. I don't know what. Had I really been paying attention, I would have put a ribbon in the tree, or I would have marked the trail with an X. I would have done something. I didn't do anything. So in the daytime, when we go back out there, I see this group of people, and I thought maybe I can find the spot where I was. And so they allowed, sure, yeah, come on along. They asked me to join, so we went, and ultimately I broke away from that group. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but ultimately I broke away from that group, and I was sitting on a log, and I was just sitting there pondering, and I heard some weird noises. Some things I just can't explain. Some things that happen in the woods. It happens. I know that when we hear things, our mind sometimes tries to put something together, associate it with something known. And in this case, I was sitting there and I heard a parachute open. And I was completely astonished. I couldn't imagine why out here in the middle of nowhere is somebody parachuting. So I looked up, and all I could see was a little bit of sky at the tops of the trees, and I heard another parachute open, or at least in what I heard, my mind said that's a parachute opening. And then moments later, a little teeny tiny parachute, it sounded like, open. And I thought, this is the strangest, goofiest, weirdest thing I've ever, what's going on? It was quirky, it was weird. And right about that same time, I had an adrenaline rush, because the sun shining over my shoulder had melted the snow across the path from me, where it had a tree bent down, a little tree, and it sprang to vertical while I was sitting there thinking about these stupid parachutes that weren't really there. And so then my adrenaline started going. At this point, you can imagine the kinds of feelings I'm going through. It's a weird sensation. And at that point, city boy, I realized I'm out in the woods, and the whole time that I've been sitting here listening to the parachutes, there's been a sound of a stick on a can with this rhythmic song, ding da ding ding da ding 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 da ding ding, and it would stop. Ding da ding da ding 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 da ding da ding, and it would stop. Start and stop, start and stop. And then so I had this whole adrenaline rush, parachute, tree, realized there's this noise, and so I stood up from the log, and I turned and I started walking towards whoever was making the noise. Now, in my mind, I'd gone out this trail with a group of people. They're having a drum circle. It could just be them on the side of the trail. So I started getting closer and closer. There's a little bit of an elevation increase, an incline, and I got to within about 40 feet of whatever was making that noise. And I thought, I just had this thought, if I'm in a 10-foot tall monkey's living room, I should probably let him know I'm here. And so I scraped my foot in the gravel, and as soon as I got to back up a little bit. As I'm approaching, the tink, the tink, 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 before it was starting and stopping. Now as I'm getting closer, it doesn't stop. It has no idea. Whatever's doing that has no idea I'm there. Dink, the dink, 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 the dink, dink, dink. I keep getting closer and closer. I get to within 40 feet. I scrape my foot in the gravel, and that music just shut off right now. And so figuring with my friends, I said, hello, I'm only 40 feet away. And, excuse me, nobody responded. And so I walked right to where the noise was coming from. Couldn't see into the woods right there off the trail, but I knew that I could keep going up the trail and I could get in and I could look back. And that's exactly what I did. I went and I looked back and I didn't see anything. Later, I'd end up joining up with the rest of my group of people. Right before I joined up with them, 4 rocks were thrown at me. 1 landed on the trail next to my right foot. 3 landed in the river next to my left foot. Kabloop, kabloop, kabloop. Right after that happened, I joined up with my group of people. We talked about why they had gone where they had gone. They had crossed a river, crossed where the road had been washed out by the river. They crossed on a log. They'd heard something paralleling them, clapping 2 times as it paced them, and then they said that it sounded like it went across the river. That's why they went across the river, but nothing happened. When they came back, I said, so when you heard it last, where was that? They pointed out where it was. As we went back, I suggested that we all pay attention to that area. And again, nothing happened as we walked past that spot. But we got about 75 yards past it. And there's 6 of us. This is all, they had it on film. There's 6 of us. And right behind us, we hear this clap, clap. And so all 6 of us turned to look behind us. And then up in front of us, we heard another one. So we looked this way. It happened again back there. It happened again up here. And then the one that was in the back went. And I said, you guys, that's the same rhythm I heard an hour ago that sounded like a stick on a can. Now it sounds like either 2 large leathery hands, maybe 2 sticks. We can't tell. But one of the gals went and rapped out a rhythm on a log with a stick within 2 minutes. Whatever was in there answered her. So as far as my experiences go, I didn't ever have a Class A visual like I've seen. But in my experience, in my lifetime, I've never known a wolf or an elk or a badger or a beaver or a cougar to clap or to throw rocks. I think that you have to have an opposable thumb. I think you have to, in order to make music, if you're going to be the composer of music, you have to have a thumb to grab a stick for that kind of a percussive instrument. And furthermore, you have to have the capability of producing music, making it that was definitely something rhythmical. Whether it was musical, I couldn't tell you, but it was rhythmical and captivating and really, really cool. That was my very first experience. I've had some other things happen since then. I've gone out for the last 15 years. Like I said, I've found footprints. We've had all sorts of really cool things happen. Never enough. 99% of the time we go out and we camp, and that's it. But we're always hoping for something, anything else, and so we keep going. That was my inspiration. What I really wanted to do is be creative and maybe try to offer something to the people that I share a campfire with so they remember the times as well as I do. And so I thought I could whittle. I'm going to start whittling, and I went and got a gouge and some chisels and some basswood, and I whittled out a little figurine that looked surprisingly like the Patterson-Gimlin film. And it took about 9 months, and I thought, well, that's really hard to do at the campfire. I don't think I'm going to be successful. And it occurred to me that I had really enjoyed working with pottery and clay when I was in high school. And so I went and got some clay, and I was kneading it, and I thought I was going to make some feet. And when I was kneading the clay, it looked like a face, and I just kept playing with it, and I just kept making more and more. And this is what I ended up with. I make masks that look like this. I make all sorts of different ones. I make blonde ones and white-haired ones and red-haired ones. And they have gray tone skin or brown or whatever, red tone. I change them up. The facial expressions change on all of them. But so this is what I do when I'm not at work. I try to make these and give them to my friends that I go out in the woods with.